is what people don't really discuss and what people don't know about issues. So remember the calculator. Before the calculator, there were devices that they were using for arithmetic, like abacus. Is it the abacus or any of those things? What do you think the manufacturers
Charles
of
Darwin.
abacus, no, of abacus,
Okay.
or those counting mechanisms, what do you think their reaction was to those that decided to manufacture calculators?
So are you saying that all of this is, this ripple effect we are facing is just because there's this discrepancy between the banks and the telcos?
Yeah, so that was a long war. Yeah, that war lingered, which somehow the regulators did not fully address. They didn't know whether to pitch their tent with the banks or to pitch their tent with the telcos. And so at some point, even the licensing, when they started this bit, one of the largest telcos was positioning also to get a banking license. And then they now started something called the bank-led mobile payments. So telcos had to partner with some banks, but some just blatantly refused to do that. Because if we had done that, what we're doing now, we would have crossed that Rubicon a long time ago. But yeah, that's history. The infrastructure that the banks had in place could not accommodate the traffic. Even one of those ones that we said, the businesses that all you need is a number. Initially, the service was fast. What happened? As people started to go on top of that service, it started to also drop, and there was failure in service.
In the words of Dan Ariely, an Israeli-American professor and author, he once said, "The more cashless our society becomes, the more our moral compass slips." All right, our next quote is from Milton Friedman, who was an American economist and statistician. He once said, "The real agenda of the Federal Reserve Bank is not to control your money, it is to control you." Okay, so our next one is from Kenneth Rogoff, who is an American economist and chess grandmaster. He once said, "I don't think it is time yet to eliminate cash, but I propose having a less cash society, not a cashless one." Our last quote is from Stefanos Lokakos, who is a genius of technology. He once said, "The internet enables the SMEs of today to become the multinationals of tomorrow." Absolutely spot on. Now let's see how all of this quote relates to what we'll be discussing tonight. Very warm greetings and welcome to The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. I am Annabel Orji. Now, the bad news is since the cash redesign policy by Central Bank of Nigeria, the war on cash is still intensifying. But the good news is that a great number of cash have been mopped up by the Central Bank of Nigeria, and there have been an upward trend in the number of customers who have visited the bank to open an account, get an ATM or POS machine in order to go with the trend of cashless economy. Because no one wants to be thrown out of the moving train. You know what I mean? Now, even though the entire transaction process looks seamless and makes for a picture-perfect story of success in moving Nigerians to cashless platforms, only if everyone had similar experiences using electronic payment channels or deploying electronic payment solutions. But another viral video of Nigerians in a long queue fighting each other to use an ATM absolutely says otherwise. Now, going cashless is an ambition of the Central Bank of Nigeria that goes back to 2012, when the Apex Bank moved to implement its first policy in Lagos. The CBN views the cashless policy as a means to reduce the amount of physical cash in circulation, thereby encouraging the use of electronic platforms for settlement or payment for goods and services. But then, Nigerians love to use their physical naira According to different reports, about 90% of transactions are still carried out in cash, despite the introduction of various electronic mode of payments, including banking agents, universal supplementary systems, data that's USSD, and points of sale that's POS, mobile bank transfers, mobile money, or QR code. So, how much has the cashless policy, the cash redesign policy, and even the recently concluded elections affected or impacted on you as an individual, as a corporate organization, and as a business owner? There's just one way to find out. And we're just about to do that with our guest, Taiwo Adepoju, who is the managing partner, Strength Africa. And we're about to let the cat out of the bag momentarily after this quick break. Please stay. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We're reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. Now let's get down to business. Our guest on the show today is Taiwo Adepoju. He is the managing partner, Strength Africa. It's good to have you on the show today, sir.
I'm so delighted to be here.
Oh, likewise.
Thank you so much.
Awesome. All right, now let's talk about business. And let's take a journey to the world of business. What exactly is happening at the moment? Like, the ordinary man will ask, the ordinary man on the streets will ask, how market? How far?
Okay, and that's a pretty interesting question, okay? And the dimension I would like to start from as to this journey is just shortly after COVID-19.
Okay.
Okay, and that accumulated into this reality that we are now post-COVID.
Are we still suffering from the disruptions caused by COVID-19?
Oh, yeah, so that set a lot of things in motion, which also influenced this thought around the VUCA world. Okay, when we say VUCA, we talk about volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And I'm going to sing that in shortly. Now, it therefore meant that COVID brought about a disruption, okay, also accelerated the rate of reinvention. So back in those days, it would have taken a longer time. Now the gestation period, for turnaround is less than 3 years. So technology is evolving faster. Even policies are evolving over time. The reality is that the business environment today is much more volatile. It's so uncertain, okay, ambiguous, all right, with so much ambiguity, and also in terms of the complexity. So narrowing down to, say, a place like Nigeria, there is a lot of complexity going on. Is it regulatory complexity? Is it political complexity? Is this political, social, security complexity? Okay, so that's that bit. You'd also see that ambiguity also along the lines of even those things I've mentioned, along those sectors also, because at some point you'll be wondering, what are they now saying? What is the policy today? What has changed? So if, for instance, let's take a dive into, say, the Naira, the change of the currency.
The Naira redesign policy.
Redesign policy. Do you know a lot of things have happened as a result of that policy? That's the ambiguity. And so you might not have been able to predict from the announcement, post-announcement up to this time. That's the ambiguity I'm talking about. We're also saying, look, uncertainty. Who would have envisaged that at this time would not have been a done deal? But there are still queues. People are still grappling with the effect. Uncertainty. We were talking about political reasons, or some people alluded to political reasons. Okay, so politics seems to have been taking a successful turn, okay, with the recently concluded elections. Yeah, people have their perspective around that. But elections are over. Can we not have cash? So is VUCA really as to, and those things spurred up from the post-COVID, climate, and that has moved on. And so we're in this. So if you felt that it's going to be back to business as usual, no, this is the current trend.
And so this is what it is, and
yeah,
that's
and
how it's going to continue.
Because things are happening. There are financial shocks all over the world. So you heard about the bank, the bank that had to be bought for $1, all right? in the US. What happened? It was that there's uncertainty. They edged against a particular funding. They moved out in that direction. Somewhere along the line, someone was hoping that people should be able to support A and B, and then that fell in short. There was a run on the bank, which could happen to any bank. Locally also, we also realized a couple of things. Uncertainty. There are a couple of banks, for lack of not mentioning their names, who would have felt that they would have experienced some of the onslaughts and, some kind of comical relief that has been made of them. There was one of those banks that you hear that if you do your transfer, you quickly go and cook, you go and visit,
oh, no.
and then maybe you sleep, and then you come back, and then and sometimes even when it says transaction successful, you still need to go and confirm and find out whether or not it was successful. Who would have envisaged that? Uncertainty. So those are the kind of things that businesses of today must brace up for. Because if you're going to be running your business, even your life, whatever it is you want to run, you have to take cognizance of these realities.
So does it actually mean that we never envisaged or even had done a plan in case of this kind of unforeseen circumstances? So
that's what I meant. I said, look, unlike before, the rate of change has further quadrupled. So before, it could take 70 years for things to change. Now, I could live here right now and then something could change. There could be a tipping point. So the rate of reinvention or the rate of change, the pace of change, that pace has increased greatly. That creates a lot of uncertainty. Because, there's this thing we call the butterfly effect. What's the butterfly effect? The flappings of a butterfly, say somewhere in China, can lead to a tornado in maybe somewhere in America. Small ripple effects, bringing about monumental shifts, monumental changes. Let's take that example, and then let's drill down to the war in Ukraine. Who would have felt till now there will be war in Ukraine? Who would have thought that the war would last for more than 3 months? Who would have envisaged the ripple effect that has led first on the energy sector, all right? Trying to also affect the economic sector and the economy of nations, leading to the question as to, hey guys, should the dollar still remain the currency to hedge against? Things are happening. Even at this moment, there seems to be agitations left, right, and center. Where is Russia? Where is China? You see, when we look at all of those things, nobody can be sure. So people, some pundits will say, oh, there's a likelihood of a third world war. Some pundits will say there's a likelihood of a change of, the economic, system. Some will say, oh, the masters are shifting. Some will say the energy trends are shifting. We're unsure. That's the uncertainty we're talking about. That's the volatility we're talking about. Exchange rates, are moving. There was a time people predicted that naira to a dollar would be 1,000.
Over 1,000.
Over 1,000. Okay, but now we can't even find the naira.
Oh no. Now, since we are talking about the naira, now what are your thoughts on? Because I know you've actually touched a little on it,
yes,
on the controversial cashless policy, starting from the naira redesign down to the amounts where you are allowed to withdraw from the banks. That's even if you even see cash, because I have not seen cash for a very long time. I don't know if you have. So now, what are your opinion on this whole issue? How much has it affected Strength Africa? How much has it affected businesses, even the small businesses, down to the woman selling pepper in the market?
So let me even give a bit of perspective to the cashless policy. The cashless policy, in line with the financial system strategy of the country then, was posited to also, deal with these issues before now. So what happened was that they had some pilot states that adopted the cashless policy that was announced, I think, 2012.
Yeah.
And once we started to experience traction, they democratized it as to, well, everybody should go on board. Now, when I look at Nigeria and I look at Kenya, some of the questions I ask myself is, Kenya significantly has driven the cashless policy through one of its products, M-Pesa, using the mobile networks, Safaricom. At that point, the CBN of today had also positioned mobile money operators, mobile payment operators, and licensed them in line with the cashless policy at that time. But something happened. Why did it succeed in Kenya, even though they started earlier? And we tried to borrow that model, and it did not work here. There are about 3 reasons.
Okay.
One is the fact that the banks were not pretty in bed with that idea, lack of a better description.
The banks here or there?
The banks here.
Okay.
The banks saw it as a war. If the telcos, the telecom operators, that seem to have penetrated largely into where there were no banks, so that a lot of people are started.
That's in terms of fintech.
You know, not even fintech now. Remember, the mobile penetration level has gone ahead far beyond the bank penetration level. We talk about the banked and the unbanked. But when we talk about the unbanked, most of them also have phones. Yes. And why do most unbanked don't use the bank? Why are they not in the financial inclusion, dragnet? Why? It's the fact that, one, low income. How much are you making that you go and deposit? People are earning by the day. So it's about what can they see, what can they hold. 1. 2, brick and mortar had been the way. That's buildings had existed before now. So will I leave, imagine point B, and take transport that is not there to go and deposit 2 kobo? No. But some of our banks did not see that. They still went on that journey of building brick and mortar rather than developing open banking, seamless banking, and even democratizing financial access through POS, through USSD and all of that. So in a place like Kenya, the CBN, the regulators, had so worked with also the telcos to see how there can be what we call interoperability, to ensure that people can transfer money seamlessly. So if you have, now there's a company now that, a few companies are doing that now. Once you have your phone number is as good as your account number. This should not have happened now. It should have happened years ago. In fact, I was part of the promoters of a particular licensed mobile money platform. But it got strangulated. The closest to it that we even have to that is also being stifled. Why? Because, and let me tell you this thing, this is what people don't really discuss and what people don't know about issues. So remember the calculator. Before the calculator, there were devices that they were using for arithmetic, like abacus. Is it the abacus or any of those things? What do you think the manufacturers
Charles
of abacus, of abacus, or those counting mechanisms, what do you think their reaction was to those that decided to manufacture calculators?
So are you saying that all of this ripple effect we are facing is just because there's this discrepancy between the banks and the telcos?
Yeah, so that was a long war. Yeah, that war lingered, which somehow the regulators did not fully address. They didn't know whether to pitch their tent with the banks or to pitch their tent with the telcos. And so at some point, even the licensing, when they started this bit, one of the largest telcos was positioning also to get a banking license.
Yeah.
And then they now started something called the bank-led mobile payments. So telcos had to partner with some banks, but some just bluntly refused to do that. Because if we had done that, what we're doing now, we would have crossed that Rubicon a long time ago. But yeah, that's history. So the reality now is that the impact of some of those things and this hurriedness, this urgency, in line with some of the policies, particularly say the Naira redesign, the question would have been, why was there this urgency?
Is there an urgency even since 2012?
No.
Is there an urgency?
The cashless policy, alongside now the redesign of the Naira, was almost leading to a policy somersault. If, for instance, remember what has made this stifling is non-availability and distribution of the newly redesigned Naira. And the seemingly short period to
the election.
No, not the election, to mop up these funds.
It's from circulation.
From circulation. And what were some of the reasons for that? Was that, look, the money that was printed is out of the banking system. And so that tending towards inflation, we need to bring it back in. But I've explained certain things. For the people at the bottom of the pyramid, it wasn't really so much of an issue. How much did they even have? How many would say they have a savings of 5,000? If we start to look objectively into what are people earning, their earning capacity. Most people live from hand to mouth. And that's why it's even still lingering. Because people need cash. There's not an enabling infrastructure to support this migration, which also led to these issues around the crashes in the transfer, platform, the failure along those systems. Because one was that businesses run as business. This was too sudden. And most times, I can tell you, without you knowing, some of the guys that do handle procurements would have probably procured a bandwidth size or something. I don't have the full terminology, but using a bandwidth or so internet provision, there would have been like a space that would have been provided for to say not more than 50 people per time.
Okay.
That was that with their understanding that how many people will also use peak period. But with this urgency, what has happened was that it was as if people were forced into a bus.
That means
with one door.
So that means you're actually saying that the fault is that people were not, there was no synergy.
Not even synergies, that the infrastructure. No, the infrastructure that the banks had in place could not accommodate the traffic. Even one of those ones that we said, the businesses that all you need is a number. Initially, the service was fast. What happened? As people started to go on top of that service, it started to also drop, and there was failure in service.
Now, why is it actually better for Nigeria? Because we know that Nigerians, they prefer to hold their physical cash wherever they are, even outside Nigeria. Nigerians, they have this pride of, okay, I just want to hold my Naira. So why is it better for Nigeria and Nigeria SMEs to even go cashless? That's one on the side. And how is this policy affecting small businesses? How is it affecting the entrepreneurs, even individually, especially those that always depend on cash for transaction? Because I know that anywhere in the world, like I said before, Nigerians would always prefer to hold their physical cash.
Yeah, and you always constituted a nuisance. So you get into a store in America or in the UK, and you're saying how much you want to pay. Okay, or Nigerians that have the money and want to buy outrightly, and the man is looking at you. Why don't you just pick and pay monthly? Do you understand? So this is also cultural, but beyond cultural, is also tied to economic development. Okay, for countries like that have operated in that order, you cannot benchmark them. You have to compare apples with apples. That's why when I started this, I started to move around Kenya experience, the South African experience. But back to your question, as to this impact, honestly, I must tell you sincerely, I did not know that this was still lingering until yesterday.
Okay.
My teammates, for whatever it is, I thought it was also another reason to ask for more Oliver Twist. And they came to me and said, it's looking like we might not be coming to work as usual. So we might, and I said, that is unacceptable. What could have been that? What could have led to that? And I was shocked. They said, there's no cash. Now, mind me, prior to this time, I don't deal with, I hardly owed cash, even before this. So I've built a life that revolves around cashless. In fact, I've been on a site whilst we're doing something in 2014 that down to the artisans, we're doing a project in Warri. I'm giving you instances of a place called Ibeji in Warri, Delta State. And I made sure that down to the lowest person in terms of the bottom of the pyramid and access to financial inclusion had an account.
Okay.
So I had to get them to configure and say, oh, the project manager will not pay you if you don't have an account. And I got used to that. So if I lived that life, even if I go into any shared cab or any of those, any platform I go to, I'm easily able to say, I'm going to go cashless. But for yesterday, they told me this. And I thought, okay, look, Strength Africa, we train banks. We have access to, at least even 5 MDs as we speak. Let's even access one of these banks. And I took them to one of the banks. In fact, once I was calling, the person said I should come right away. Can you believe it? We were begging for 10,000 naira.
Interesting.
Not that they would dash. That's begging for. But thank God for grace. I would have been disgraced in front of my colleagues. So somehow someone came to the rescue and gave us 5,000 naira. Unimaginable. Now let's look at that effect, because immediately that happened, I started to now imagine, because I felt that it was only during the political or the election time period that we had that going on. I now started to further now drill down, and I realized that the impact cannot be quantified. You can't even put a value to it. It's such that productivity, do you know, productivity would have dropped to the lowest ebb. What do I mean by productivity? So the man that ordinarily will resume at work first, so a case in point, the man that drives me, he has a time he has to resume. But he's further negotiating how he's going to collect cash to go home. I didn't used to understand when they say, oh, they don't. And then the next day he comes late.
He tells you cash.
It's cash. And like when there's cash everywhere.
Oh.
And guess what has happened? So first he struggles, and because he knows that if he does this regularly, there might just be a replacement, right? Because I didn't know. And it's not as if I'm insensitive. I also take care of my, colleagues. It was the fact that I didn't know. I was ignorant, unconsciously ignorant about this reality. So he will come late. So after some time, he started to pay to get cash. So the money that would have lasted him for 30 days, probably lasting him barely 15 days. So he's already demotivated. He cannot put his best to work. One is grappling mentally. Then his financial position has now been, crippled. Who suffers? It's the business. So people will come to work. They mark time at work. But they're thinking of how to get back home. And they're home, they're thinking how to come back to. Now they're not resting. there's stress. All of those things have so tying it down to the butterfly effect. All those have consequential impact on the business. Trauma, psychological disorientation. You now begin to see that. That's why I said, how do you place a value? I've just given you one segment of the effect of this hurriedly implemented or redesigned implementation. It wasn't properly thought through. Tying into what we talked about M-Pesa or in Kenya, as to, so how would the telcos have helped? There's regulation. They can't play. The financial environment is so regulated, so complex and fragmented, unlike other environments that are liberal. So you need a license for everything. And some people are still saying, we need more regulation, we need more regulation. That's what's stifling this interoperability, this pace, this fastness, this speed, uncertainty. Fintechs at some point, some started to do crypto. There was a ban. You would have invested in that infrastructure. There's a ban. So what next? So you see, now that means that people must now be very dynamic.
Okay,
people
so we're going to get to that part where we now begin to create solutions. We'll do for a break, but before we go on that break, yes. I just recall my the last shopping I did in the market. Good. As it was almost hellish because it was stressful. I literally suffered because I had no cash, but I had cash. I had money in my bank. Money. So things I needed to buy, you had to buy cash. That's the black market now is now like everywhere. So I gave my money, but almost everybody, especially those that are selling egusi, they told me, no, we are not selling egusi for transfer. It has to be with cash. And that one even pained me. And then the transfers that you did, the electronic payment, most times it didn't go right. So you have to wait there until everything happened. So is it actually possible for Nigeria businesses to survive in a cashless economy, considering the fact that a lot of people are still unbanked? Because I remember talking to someone and he said, I can't take transfer because I don't have bank.
Yeah. So remember, that's why when we started to talk about this, and I truly empathize with you on that. I truly empathize with you on your market experience. I experienced a similar thing. I tried to do a transfer. Now not going to the market. I was in the restaurant, and in the course of transferring, I'd done the transfer 3 times. And you don't want to know how much they charged me. And yet, they did not get the alert. So I was busy sending the receipt of transfer to them. One, they are taking 3 payments from me. So imagine if I didn't have any other funds in that account. I would have been stranded. It took them almost 72 hours to reverse that money. But guess what?
72 hours is even a short time for some people. Yeah. Sometimes it even take 15 working days.
Okay, so I was quite lucky. But let me also now tell you the downside of that. So apart from that, they couldn't also, even though it was based on relationship, and they had not seen it after a day, I still now had to raise money again and send to them before they now got payment. So imagine someone that has a limited access to cash or to funds. How does that person want to survive? Now, then go back to the bank and unbanked. It will work if only we can and that would lead to the further ensuring that there's workability or some kind of working arrangement between the telcos and the banks. And a couple of fintechs have started to bridge that gap. But what has happened now is that in terms of the capacity they prepared for, they now have to increase capacity. And that's what eventually will now work. Okay. And you really don't need to have a bank account, because really your phone number can be your bank account. You also really don't need to go into the 4 walls of a bank. Remember, brick and mortar is giving way to without a brick, without a wall. So banking has now gone to the point where you don't even have to go into the bank.
Okay. Okay, so now because you talked about you don't need to go to the bank and they talked about fintech, let's talk about POS operators. Yes. Those ones, they're like another kettle of fish entirely. So we go to some POS operators during this time that this happened, this Naira black market and all, and then you want to get 10,000, they will tell you 2,000 for 1,000 naira. So at some point, people are like, I think POS people are just, I'm trying to manage my word. Some people say, these POS people look like they're the devil's advocates. Do you agree that they actually took undue advantage of this situation?
People are opportunists. All right, so maybe they took undue advantage. But also remember, when things are scarce, then demand goes up. And when there's demand, that's also opportunity. That's really business. So if they're actually in that business, then it's actually business for them. But maybe they over-profited from that business. But this is also part of the non-homogeneity of this so-called regulation in line with the financial system strategy, in line with the cashless policy, in line with even the Naira redesign policy. It's not congruent. What do I mean? You see, agency banking was supposed to support the cashless policy. The agency banking gave room to point of sale terminals. The point of sale terminals meant that you did not have to now go to brick and mortar, but that the bank has come to you. So whoever was doing business, remember, Jinodru is doing business, Iyakafaya is doing business, Amina is doing business, Ngozi is doing business, Shaliwa, everybody is doing business. So what are they doing? They are receiving cash. So those points now became banks. Invariably, because they had the reservoir of cash. So guess what? That was supposed to address the issues around, I can't go to the bank. So Iyabodino is already there. She can give you cash in case you need to pay Sikira. She has a POS. Now you don't even need cash. Somehow she can give you a code and you go and use it to collect. But you know what? Now let me tell you what happens. The policy somersaults we experience in this country is because somehow people see only opportunities. They are briefcase businessmen. Unlike in other parts in Africa, I think this is one of the things that people need to begin to drill and address. You'll find people that have no business in a particular sector trying to play in that sector. Or because, for instance, they'll say, oh, POS, they want to get people that want to start issuing POS. They don't even understand the A to Z. Somebody comes to meet them and say, hey, guy, do you know that there's money in POS? Can we deploy 5,000 terminals? If we deploy this, do you know how much we'll be making? The guy doesn't even understand how it links up with the policy. The guy is there for the business. So how will he support the policy? No, he's there for the business. But imagine if somebody was a stakeholder, ab initio. He's going to follow through as the businesses and along the value chain progresses.
But do you recall that at some point, even the Central Bank of Nigeria halted the POS?
Yeah, why? Because after some time, they soon now realized that, remember, two things. POS was supposed to be a strategy then to support the cashless policy, to also mop up funds and to ensure reduced need for cash. But remember, this reduced need for cash, why do people want to hold to cash? Is this issue of trust? Yes. Cash is paper. I will pay you. Do you understand? So that exchange of paper, I buy something from A, that was what it was supposed to be. What was technology supposed to do? As an enabler, technology was supposed to help now say, look, rather than deal with paper, you could get, remember, let me tell you something. There was a time if you buy a recharge card and send to somebody in a location, in Guagalada right now, that person does not need to go to the bank. Can go to either his colleague and tell you, I have 1,500 recharge card. How much cash will you give me? And there was even unregulated. Can you see? Unregulated. People were already operating as banks. They'll say, okay, I'll give you 1,004. The man has taken value of 1,005. That's how the system is supposed to work. So eventually, once people know that once I'm able to do a transfer, there's value, then why am I carrying cash?
So now, according to Kenneth, he says that we should think of doing less cash, not cashless. Do you agree?
Well, less cash will tend eventually to cashless.
All right.
But so at some point, there are some things that you want to buy a goosey, or you want to pay into a vending machine. Even in the advanced climbs today, you get to the airport, you want to get your trolley. You don't need anybody to interface with, but there's still a machine that requires you to put a coin or to put a naira, their currency. Why? Because we can't, maybe eventually we'll eliminate cash with barcodes and all of those things. But for now, less cash. We can't, totally.
Let's go on a quick break, and when we return, we'll continue this conversation with Taiwo Adepoju, Managing Partner, Strengths Africa. I will see you shortly.
Something that is also alarming is the fact that the regulators or the Nigerian players seem to now think that everything must be on the people, whereas they're not providing enough for the people. So we are hearing that they want to increase VAT from, remember VAT was 5%. VAT is now 7.5%. But I was reading, and I don't know, at some point, they were saying they're suggesting that they should increase to 10%. That burden on the business of today that you are not supporting, that has to pay...
That provide their own electricity and all.
Provide, so there are these guys they call the health operators or what? Wole Wole in Yoruba. Those guys, if you open a canteen or a restaurant, those guys will be coming to feed fat on your restaurant.
So now that's like more job for the boys.
And guess what? They are not even doing the work itself. Those the burdens of all of those on the Nigerian business of today is humongous.
Welcome back. If you just joined us, this is The Conversation. We are reaching you from KAFTAN's television studio here in the nation's capital, Abuja. In case you just joined us, you've actually missed out on a whole lot, but then you can still join in the conversation. As our guest on the show tonight is Taiwo Adepoju. He is the Managing Partner of Strengths Africa. Now, before we went on that break, we've actually talked about quite a lot of things. Now, are there innovations? Because we're trying to talk about solutions, creating solutions to these challenges. So are there innovations that an entrepreneur can actually develop at such a time as this? Because that's why they're actually called entrepreneurs. So they should have the ability to see solutions where others are seeing problems. Like you talked about during COVID-19, where and then at the time you had some businesses that were drowning. And then you still had some businesses that were thinking of ways to cash out on that, like the virtual platforms, Zoom, and all those that also made nose masks, those that made hand sanitizers. So they were cashing out on that issue that some people were having a problem with. So for people like entrepreneurs or technopreneurs, what kind of creativity can they bring or innovate to cushion this effect?
Okay. And thank you for that question, because in line with some of the things that are going on right now, we must understand that technology is an enabler. In all the things that, all discussions that we're having, technology is an enabler. And being an enabler, you're also exploring, you want to address pain points, profile solution, troubleshoot, as the case may be. Now, this means that people that get into that space, even though some suddenly stumble on the sector they want to play at, have taken a deliberate attempt to understand the process and then follow through. Some have been early entrants and they've died. There are a couple of companies that moved ahead of themselves because Nigeria wasn't ready. Nigeria wasn't ready culturally. There's also this thing around culture. Let me tell you this bit around culture, and then I'll move down fully to your question. Do you know now there's a level of distrust to the financial systems that we don't even understand the implication for the full adoption of this policy. So the guy that opens an account somehow got scammed of his 70,000 naira. Will he ever go to the bank again? Do you understand? No matter the guy will still tell you, I know they go carry my money, go bank. Because even there was no mechanism to address that. Do you know how many frauds that are unreported? In fact, there was a recent one now that the big company is trying to now recover where the funds are trapped. So when we start to even talk about some of these issues, those are some of the things that you want to start to. So with the problems also, there are also other opportunities. Cybersecurity, because hackers. So hacking is not just so there's ethical hacking. There's those that do the bad hacking, right? So opportunities also in that line. So there are plethora of opportunities for technopreneurs. There's also an opportunity for the country. My recommendation about the opportunity for the country is that the regulator should please remain a regulator and not be a player. Because one of the things about the regulator being a player is that it also now makes competition difficult. Because then we must have a deregulated financial system. Yeah, not fully deregulated, but regulated to the point that it's not over-regulated. And also, you don't want to have you play in that market. Because once you start playing in that market, what eventually happens is that you are beginning to compete with the people that you are regulating. So who regulates you? So what does, there are a couple of policies. I'm careful not to, for not lack of, courage, but just to not fully make a mockery of some of the things that are working, particularly by the regulators. And a lot of great things are working by the regulators. But why do we want to be involved with the issuance of XYZ? Why do you also... So look at the case of the e-Naira.
The e-Naira.
Meanwhile, other people have created platforms. Young Nigerians have created platforms, and then we wake up in the middle of the night one day and we cut it short. And now we're getting into that. Now, do you know that policy truly stifled investments in the country? Do you know how many people suffered from that? You see, in the midst of complexity and ambiguity, lack of uncertainty, in the midst of uncertainty also. So how does even the technopreneur prepare? Because tomorrow will come now, you hear CBN is saying XYZ. So anybody doing business also should be very flexible.
Okay.
That's what I'll say. You must be very flexible in these times. The opportunities are huge and enormous. You must be able to swiftly move in line with also the rate of reinvention that is going on. That things are moving, pam, 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 at a fast pace. And technology is shifting constantly, okay? And we must also stop trying to copy. Do you understand? Copy without fully understanding the economy, the environment that we want to play.
Where we're copying from.
Yeah, the environment that we copy. So M-Pesa, there's a Nigerian company that is doing the same thing M-Pesa is doing, but have not experienced success as much as M-Pesa had achieved. Why? The regulatory environment, the cultural dynamics, okay? The issue of trust, the people's, these are issues that eventually we can now begin to, that portends opportunity for technopreneurs.
All right. Now, let's talk about Nigerian businesses and the last elections that took place, even though that election was planned for months, years. So you should actually think that businesses will be ready to receive any kind of shocker that came with the process. So tell us, as a business consultant, did the election actually touch on any part of, did it affect any part of businesses as much as it did to some Nigerians individually?
It affected businesses. One, let's even look at let's deal with the most recent postponement. So I booked a venue for my event on XYZ that I've been planning based on the timetable you released months back. I fixed my wedding. I fixed this. I've done that. I've paid for this. I've booked a ticket. I've done this. I've done that and done that. Then you wake up in the middle of the week before the date and you say postponement. have you calculated that time? There's an impact on the business, on the people. So that's one bit. Look at that same period, Nigerians were faced with also a lot of other issues, particularly in Abuja, being a central point where I operate from. Fuel scarcity. So there's election, there's fuel scarcity.
There's no cash.
There's no cash. Do you know that a week before the election, I wasn't in the country, but I came in, and one of the things that it just occurred to me that I had to also help people, not based on party affiliations, but based on the challenges they were facing while they were trying to vote. My family and I, by the time we were done with our own process, we had to mobilize drinks. Because there are people there, remember, they are there to exercise their civic responsibility. But guess what? There's no cash to even buy water. Because the guy selling water will not sell because there's no cash. And there was also the issues around the network challenges. Some people also could not move from A to B. So those things have monumental effects on businesses. And businesses, right, I'm sure by the time the statistics bureau comes up with their data, you realize the impact.
Are you actually hopeful on the data that they will come up with?
Oh,
because
yeah,
a lot of people just say that it doesn't meet the reality on ground, especially in the market. When they bring up.
So no matter how bad and poorly those figures seem to be projected, it's still also, at least there's a baseline. So if for instance they say the impact is 30%, you and I can now say, look, in fact, it's it's more than 30%, it's like maybe 100%. But you know that there's something. So that an admittance of that there's a negative impact on the economy is also
something, a
baseline for us to build up on.
All right, now let's talk about cash devaluation. How much of an impact or implication does it have on businesses?
Let's even talk about the technopreneurs. Let's talk about the entrepreneurs that are now, we call them virtualpreneurs, or as the case may be, people that were doing businesses online. The devaluation led to a lot of things. So let me address one bit. The bit around, currently right now, people cannot pay for services that are offered outside of Nigeria with the Nigerian cards. You understand? But those were the effects of that devaluation. Because now, we now don't have enough foreign reserve to cushion the effect where we should, when you need dollar, you cannot get it. But remember, that also did not start only from the issues around industrial development or economic development. It was as a result of the poorly the poor situation of the educational sector. So let's even look at the poor situation of the educational sector. Such that most people have now using what they call JAPA, or using what we call in Strength Africa, Japanomics. A lot of people now have left the shores, exchanging our dollar, okay? And so they are taking our dollar out, but there's not enough dollar coming in. And the only form where dollar comes in is through remittances, and through oil. Yes, overseas remittances, because now we're almost behaving like India. We have a lot of people in diaspora that are sending money back home, and that conversion. So that's one, remittances, huge. And Africa also takes a huge chunk of revenue from remittances. But the other bit is the oil. But the non-oil sectors should have been so developed to become enablers to bring in more effects.
When you talk non-oil, that's agriculture?
Yes, every other thing that is non-oil, every other thing, including services. Okay, including services. But now, the guy that is providing service, the devaluation has also affected the guy. So he needs some things that would be imported, right? Now he cannot get them in. So this devaluation, let me tell you what has happened. It has now impacted on, to some extent, so people are now becoming more innovative. Because guess what? Every day is, Nigerians they're very resilient. And so every time there's a blockage here, there will always seem to be a way. So look at the issues around Zoom. Till date, Zoom, you have to use your dollar card to pay, right? Now, people have found a way to see how they can pay for those things, or some of them are creating other options around that market, right? To say, something as basic as you want to pay for, some of you guys that use the other phone, I use the better phone. Their store, you have to use a card, right? And they're saying they don't receive. Is that you use any of those similar phones that you have to pay for everything? Okay.
Even music.
Even music. Now the process of devaluation was such that was the ripple effect of devaluation. So the real devaluation is the fact that today you set up a business, you borrowed money to set up the business at maybe say $10,000. You are earning in naira. Before, the business you borrowed $10,000 was able to generate equivalent of $5,000 back then, maybe at say I don't know what the exchange rate would have been, but you wake up suddenly, even with government official rate of 425 or thereabout, or so you wake up in the middle of the day, and then you now have to go and source for dollars at 7.45.
That's from the black market.
From the black market. Because if you wait on the banks, it will take them 4-5 months before they even provide for you.
Now, why are we even talking about dollar in Nigeria? Because we keep hearing that Nigeria's economy has been dollarized, and then some people will say that's the problem. Why have we dollarized Nigeria's economy? But then somehow you cannot separate the dollar from the SMEs and the MSMEs. So how much does dollar affect businesses, be it SME, MSMEs, or large conglomerates operating in Nigeria?
There are lots of things we don't produce here. Let's not even talk about what we are producing. Look at, is it not a shame that today we don't have a national carrier? And part of the reasons why maybe one of those countries would have shut us down, because now they don't have frequency of flight, because also they cannot repatriate their money, is because of the fact that we are dependent on them to move us about. Imagine in Africa we have even Rwanda now, if you see how frequently they are becoming a hub in East Africa, see what they're doing in Ethiopia, and yet Nigeria does not, so that's part of the issue. When we cannot produce things or avail services, then the people that need you, or you need people to provide those services, are saying no, they don't want your naira. So over time, it becomes dollarized, because people now need to procure things. When they want to procure, they cannot get it at the official rate. If the official rate was possible, I would easily say, okay, give me the naira equivalent. But now it's not possible. I say, okay, can you give me dollar? Because except you are giving me the equivalent in what is available instead of the official rate, that's the only time I can transact.
All right. Really sad.
But there's a policy that says that, you can't be playing business in Nigeria and be collecting dollars. Disclaimer.
Now, because you talked about policies, what are the effect and implications of some of these federal government policies on businesses, especially with regards to like this disclaimer that you just gave, and then you also talk about tax, the huge task that a lot of businesses have to go through. You also talk about the parking lot task, or the parking lot tax, and then the telecoms tax. Yes, I remember the last one that was even talked about recently. And then two questions, and I'd like you to unbundle them in one breath. That's one on the side. And then secondly, even talking about the Startup Act that was recently granted assent by President Muhammadu Buhari. Not much has been heard. So how much does all of this affect businesses? So
without being a patron to government, there has been some significant progress, particularly with the ease of doing business. There has been some significant progress with even the startup segment and the sector, as it were. So, but one of the things that I would say is the fact that one who is following through. Okay, so election in Nigeria, a transition year starts from maybe 12 months before the election. So some of the people that are supposed to be managing the businesses were busy moving around, right? Even though this slightly reduced in this transition period, but majority went on because before all the offices would just be shut and people would be campaigning. But you can imagine the president gave a mandate that, hey, these people will be running their affairs. So I imagine the office of the vice president that is largely in charge of a bit of the economy. Was really, pivoting some of those or piloting some of those things. So the effect is the fact that we now can say that ease of doing business has truly is gaining traction.
Okay.
But the issue also around multiple taxation. Remember, when you are not producing, you also must get tax. You must get inflow, whichever way. So something that is also alarming is the fact that the regulators or the Nigerian players seem to now think that everything must be on the people, whereas they are not providing enough for the people. So we are hearing that they want to increase VAT from, remember VAT was 5%. VAT is now 7.5%. But I was reading, and I don't know, at some point, they were saying they are suggesting that they should increase to 10%. That burden on the business of today that you are not supporting, that has to pay...
That provide their own electricity and all.
Provide, so there are these guys they call the health operators or what? Wole wole in Yoruba. Those guys, if you open a canteen or a restaurant, those guys will be coming to feed fat on your restaurant.
So now that's like more job for the boys.
And guess what? They are not even doing the work itself. Those burdens, the burdens of all of those on the Nigerian business of today is humongous. All
right. Our time is fast spent, but in just less than 30 seconds, I'm going to ask you, May 29th, a new administration will be sworn in or re-sworn in, like in some states they're re-elected their representatives. So are you actually optimistic that the new administration will do anything good for businesses?
I'm incurably optimistic.
Okay.
Incurably optimistic as to this new wave.
All right.
Irrespective of the fact that it might not be a change in party, but I know for certainty that there's a change of guard. And this change of guard will probably also launch Nigeria, with a renewed hope to achieving better, returns in business and even as a country, as it were. Nigerians have gone through a lot, I can tell you. And truly, I think it's about time now we start smiling.
Thank you. What a fine way to drop this conversation. About time we start smiling. I quite agree with that one. Thank you so much, Taiwo Adepoju. It's been a wonderful time having this talk with you.
Thank you, Annabel. I truly appreciate it.
All right, viewers, that's where we end this conversation. We have been chatting with Taiwo Adepoju, who is the managing partner, Strength Africa. It's been a wonderful time here on The Conversation. I'm sure you must have been rightly educated, entertained, and informed. I will see you next time. Keep watching The Conversation. Till I come your way again, I'm Annabel Orji from the nation's capital, Abuja. Thank you so much. God bless Nigeria.